Hey everyone, welcome back. So, for today's topic, I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about memorization. This has been one of the most requested topics in the past while, but also happens to be one of the most difficult for me to explain or to put into words, since I've always felt that the process of memorization is naturally embedded in the bigger general process of learning, internalizing, and interpreting a new piece of music. In other words, it's not something I would have singled out or focused on in particular. In this video, though, I'll take a crack at sharing my personal experience in words, what has worked for me personally, and try to lay down some basic tips that could prove helpful. So let's get down to it. For me personally, memorization always goes hand in hand with the emotional element of music making. When I would go through a piece of music for the first time, there's naturally an immediate emotional impression made. As I make my way through the piece, I jump from emotional state to emotional state, and I would allow myself just to be taken along on the ride and to connect the dots and form an emotional roadmap, based on certain compelling or significant moments within that piece, moments that mean something in particular to me. In other words, I form an emotional journey that I find inevitable to complete and can't resist completing. It's ultimately this intense urge and desire to arrive at and channel each moment fully and to wring out as much musical substance as possible that guides me where to go. So I guess that would be the main idea, which is to make the association with a particular emotional state or sensation, idea, or image, something abstract yet memorable and palpable for you. And for this to happen, I think it's very important to dedicate yourself to soaking in the piece from the very first moment and to allow yourself to develop a personal relationship with the music and how to make that association. I would personally look at the underlying harmonic progression or movement. Perhaps if there are certain harmonies, chords, or any other kind of significant moment that gives you a memorable sensation of some kind, I think those would have the potential of being markers that could light the way for all the material that comes after it or even around it. I remember seeing an interview, I think it was with Matthew McConaughey, talking about the monologues he had to do in the first season of True Detective, which was absolutely amazing, by the way, but how one sentence could trigger a thought and hence the next few minutes of speech, and then how a word or even a letter could do that as well. Well, all right. Well, there you go. It's the same process in music, even if there are no words involved. The point is that each marker, whether it's a sentence, a word, a certain harmony, chord, note, armed with its particular emotional significance or association, sets off or triggers in the mind an entire subsequent section. So in the grand scheme of things, instead of thinking note by note when it comes to memorization, perhaps it's better to start thinking marker by marker. Now, in addition to emotional association by way of markers, I thought I'd also talk a little bit about physical markers as it relates to the actual instrument and the playing of that instrument to further add to the memorization arsenal. For example, let's take a passage such as this variation from the second movement of Bartók's Second Violin Concerto. In passages such as this, which are more complex and less obvious, physical association could greatly help speed up the process of internalizing a passage into your muscles as well as memorizing it in the mind. So such physical markers could be a particular finger on the string, a particular action or movement such as shifting, the movement up and down the neck, or a particular bowing even, or a certain pattern of movements or actions. Let's just take finger action as an example for a marker at the beginning of this passage. This particular C stands out for me when I'm reading through the passage, as it requires a noticeable shift in position. We're not staying in the same position, but we're kind of shifting the hands slightly upwards. Because of this noticeable change of position, then I can easily remember it and designate it as a physical marker. And then in my mind, through repetition, I would associate the rest of the flourish with that particular marker, if that makes any sense. For another example, let's say a pattern of movements. So in this case, I've always found that shifting up and down rapidly, like just moving very rapidly from one place to another on the neck, is something I find quite easy to remember, hence making it ideal for a marker as well. Let's say at the end of this variation, when you have that longer barrage of notes. When it comes to memorizing, I would set the marker as that quick jump back and forth at the beginning of that passage. And once I set that marker, then I work slowly and incrementally in blocks until I reach the end of the variation. After everything seems quite solid and well internalized here, then it's time to concentrate more on what happens in the right arm. Alright, that's it for today. I hope those little examples from my personal way of working helped, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.